guitars in a brand new way. Rocky really rally, man, we do it every day. Well, it's a bop-bop-a-doo-bop, the classroom hop. Bop-bop-a-doo-bop, the classroom hop. Bop-bop-a-doo-bop, the classroom hop. Rocking back to school, do the classroom hop.
Hello and welcome back at my place. If you're the first time here, please subscribe and click the bell. I will be uploading more interesting stuff later so that you don't miss it. What about today's episode? No, it's not Grady Martin Rockabilly lesson. And it's not Scotty Moore Rockabilly lesson either. It's Barney Kessel Rockabilly guitar lesson. Yes, Barney Kessel, a famous jazz guitar legend, who, by the way, back in the 50s was a studio session ace, recording with many other people, including Lew Williams. And his solos and his guitar sound, by the way, we will talk deep into detail about his guitar sound in the third section of this video. So it was probably one of the most mean, evil and dirty things in a rockabilly guitar of the decade. So let's check it out. Let's start with the accompaniment parts. First of all, we have, well, Brian Setzer's Fishnet Stockings actually. Since, again, Barney Kessel was a jazz player, he used octaves for that. And the rhythm of this thing is Charleston. Charleston, Charleston, we're gonna learn 3 hours in a brand new way. So, in the breaks, it's just a common G bar chord 4 times. And then, coming to the refrain, there are 3 common blues chords, C, D and G. We will play C9 for C, D9, the same shape but 2 frets higher for D, and G6 for G. Plus, there'll be melodic lines when transitioning from one chord to another. Rockin' back school, do the classroom hop. The rhythmic pattern here goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, rockin' back school, do the classroom hop. And then, in the ending of the song, there is some more of that octave fishnet stocking thing. There's a very elegant melodic line starting from G on first string, then F on second string, and all the way down to B. B open second string and half-tone steps. And these notes are actually double stops, so the high G stays there all the time. One interesting detail. Some months ago I recorded a draft version of this video, and here is how I play the same lick back then. As you can see, in the very beginning I stretch my fingers, I mean left hand, so that I play 2 G notes on both first and second string. It's called perfect unison. If you'd like to do the same, it's all about left hand's thumb position. Normally, you probably keep it like this somewhere here above the neck. However, for stretching, it needs to pretend you're a classical guitar player and keep it differently, like this. It will allow you to stretch more. But why did I do it? Well, if you listen to the recording attentively, you will hear exactly the same perfect unison thing in the beginning of the solo. But did Barney Kessel really do the same? Actually, he didn't. As a matter of fact, not only these first notes, but the whole guitar part from this song was kind of overdubbed. Not really overdubbed, but kind of. We'll discuss what does it exactly mean in the next section of the video, covering the guitar sound of Barney Kessel. For now, let's just play it. And that's the next lick. It involves some tremolo picking. Tremolo picking is about two key points. Number one is the motion, right hand's motion. Normally, it looks probably like this. Normally, I mean when you don't use tremolo picking. However, for the tremolo stuff, it should be more of this. As you can see, it starts all the way from the elbow, not just the wrist. The second key point is about the overall feeling of the picking hand and maybe the angle of the pick. It should be a very fast but at the same time short and subtle movement. The pick shouldn't get too far away from the strings, it should actually stay on the strings, it needs to have a contact with strings constantly. Well, it maybe can help if you imagine your pick is resting on the strings, or maybe even leaning on them. And at the same time, it shouldn't dive too deep into, and that's where changing picking angle could be useful. What I do, I rotate the picking hand a little bit so that the pick doesn't stay parallel to the strings, but has some angle. It is a completely different paradigm, and I actually adjust my right hand's position in advance already when playing the previous lick. Luckily, it's not very demanding. So that was about the picking technique in general. Now let's get back to this particular lick. It goes like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, whoop, up. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, whoop, up. So it's 3 groups of triplets plus a couple of notes. And if you maintain a steady alternate picking pattern, you will find those 2 final notes. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, up, down. While normally, if there was no triplets before, it would be the opposite, first down and then up. And that's why it sounds so syncopated. 1, 2, 3. Finally, if you would really like to strive for perfection, well, in fact for imperfection, here is yet one more thing. Barney Kessel doesn't fret the chord, is by the way a C sharp diminished, so he doesn't fret it properly. For the first 2 groups of triplets he frets just B flat on first string, while the rest of strings are muted with their left hand, with the index finger. And for the last triplet group, it's only C sharp on third string. Another note of that chord shape. And the rest is again muted. Yeah, well, maybe there is still a touch of B flat. So in overall, what he plays is this. 1, 2, 3. But in the end, it's up to you how imperfect you would like to be, either this way or picking across the whole chord. It sounds good either way. And that was just the first two licks. Let's see if now we get a relief. Here is the next lick, starting from that same tremolo picking stuff. And here is the rhythmic pattern of this lick. 1, 2, wah-pa-da, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Barney Kessel is a jazz cat, so everything is heavily syncopated. Now for these bands, it needs to keep B flat on first string as it is while bending second string. Effectively, the bands should transform this double stop into this one. If you're not used to string bending, the hint is actually to practice it with distortion. I mean, the Barney Kessel sound, once again we'll discuss it later, it is somewhat distorted, so don't hesitate to add an overdrive pedal in the chain. It will implicitly add some compression, so the notes will sustain for longer, making it easier to bend precisely to the needed pitch. Finally, we have something more conventional. I mean the next lick, and of course I'll start it from the previous one. A little bit of sliding, and then there is some more bending. One, two, three. Once again, consider adding an overdrive pedal for easier bending, or actually easier pitching. As one more hint, here is what this lick would sound like if we replace bands with slides. 1, 2, 3. So now we can play the whole solo, and it goes like this. I've announced this talk several times, so let's have it. The fact is, I really dig roots of distortion, so I took this video as a personal challenge, trying to chase the dirty sound. On the recording, obviously it was coming from a small overdriven tube amp, and luckily I have a pedal that does just that. It emulates an old Super amp from the 50s. And just to remind you, here is the first demo that I recorded using this pedal. In case you're interested, apart from the pedal, I was using a Vox Little Nitrane amp into Eminence Raging Cajun speaker, and my guitar has its pickup wired straight to the jack. And I would say it's somewhat close to that Barney Kessel tone. What do I mean? Well, in the very beginning of the solo, there's a couple of notes, these ones. So actually this G note. Barney Kessel plays it all alone during the break. So I extracted it from the recording, analyzed its frequency content, and used as a reference. Now let's get a bit nerdy. Here, the blue line represents frequencies of that note played by Barney Kessel, and the red line is the same note from my demo. Both have the same overall shape, peaking at 780 Hz, and 2.3 kHz, although mine has more mid-range and less bass. On the original recording, however, it could be the tail of the previous double bass note contributing to that bass response. And that's what I mean when I say it was coming relatively close. In fact, I was able to get a similar result also using a different amp and a more common tube screamer style pedal, although it appeared to be not really an amp and a pedal thing, but more of a microphone placement thing. Here is what my recording setup was looking like. What you can see is that the microphone is not standing at the center, it's moved to the side. Every time it was in the center, I was getting a huge peak at 1.5 kHz instead of this reference picture. But there was still something missing, because every time you add an overdrive, you start sounding a little bit like Brian May, not like Barney Kessel. I mean, too refined, too compressed. That's actually the word. Indeed, there is some compression on the original recording, but at the same time, there is some spanky attack. Well, overdrive and compression usually come together as a single package, so where did that spank come from? That was really a head scratcher, until I recalled about those recording techniques of the 50s. They didn't close mic guitar amps. What they had usually was just one or two microphones in the room, capturing the whole band together with all of the room sounds. So what if the acoustic guitar sound was bleeding into these microphones together with the amp sound? That would explain the spank. Even more, that would explain the overdubbing. Do you remember I mentioned that the guitar parts in this song were kind of overdubbed? In reality, it was one guitar, but captured in two different ways simultaneously. So sometimes it might really sound like two different guitars. And that was actually the technique I used to record my final demos for this video. Now, just for fun, I will do the same once again, but I will use a different guitar and a different amp. Let's see how it turns out. So here is the setup I will be using. Right behind me is a VHT Special 6 amp, known for its Fendery sound. To get the dirt, I have this device, which is completely handmade. As you might guess, it's a clone of DoD 250. And last but not least, I have this microphone over here that looks like a big sausage, and it's an omnidirectional mic, meaning it will capture everything in the room. So I will place it over here and will go myself there so that the distance will be my actual volume control, allowing me to balance between the acoustic sound and the amplified sound. And thank you for watching. I'll be back.